Hello and welcome to another episode of Voices of the Diaspora, a KTE production. I am here today with Mr. Jacob Sparks. Uh, Mr. Jacob Sparks, how about you? Could you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yes, Christ is risen, Christos anesti.
Alithos Anesti.
My name is Jacob Sparks. Me and Telemachos were classmates together, and I am here today to talk about Bible passages you don't understand because you don't read Greek. It's also funny that I am on Voices of the Diaspora when, as you can clearly tell by my last name, Sparks, I'm not Greek at all. Also, just as a disclaimer, I was taught in undergrad the Erasmian pronunciation, and then I had to repent of that and learn the correct pronunciation. So if any of my pronunciations are bad, forgive me. I am trying to repent as much as I can.
Well, I'm certainly glad that you were working on that, on your repentance
Yes,
of
yes.
this great evil. But yeah, all right. Well, why don't we get started a little bit? I mean, basically, what we're going to do today is we're going to look at sort of what you said. We're going to look at these biblical passages that a lot is lost if you just read the English and you don't know the Greek. So we're going to kind of look at these and maybe see what's really being said and also maybe how it's, why that's kind of an important thing to know these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess first, just to get started, I'll tell a little bit about myself and some background info. I studied at the University of Georgia. I graduated in 2020, spring of 2020, right as the world was ending. I got a Bachelor of Arts in Religion, Bachelor of Science in Mathematics. So my religion degree was mainly historical critical study of the New Testament. That's where I took a bunch of courses in Attic Greek, up through translating some Homer and Plato. And then I was struggling with Homer and Plato, and then I went to the New Testament, and I was like, "Wow, this is a lot easier. This is great." And then my degree in mathematics was in pure mathematics, so proof-based mathematics. Uh, After I graduated, I got the blessing from my metropolitan to go to seminary, so I studied at Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology from fall 2020 to spring 2024, and graduated with a Master of Divinity degree. I am by no means an academic expert in Koine or in Attic Greek, but I can read it well enough. And as the Italian proverb goes, trudatore traditore, that is to say, translator, traitor. So there is no such thing as a perfect translation. Something is lost in translation every time you translate. And even with this two-word passage from Italian, you can kind of tell because even some of the rhyming, I mean, I guess you get the or at the end of translator, traitor, but even then it rhymes better in Italian
Mm,
versus in English. So even in the translation of that brief proverb, you can see that the proverb is true, that all translators are traitors.
it's true.
Uh, so all the passages I quote, all the Greek passages, are from the 1912 patriarchal text. So this is the text of the New Testament as published by the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople. So if you were to go to any parish in the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America, for instance, and hear the New Testament being read, it's going to be read from this manuscript. And then I give just a contrast, sort of like a standard English translation from the New King James Version. The reason I've used this is because the New King James Version is translated from the Textus Receptus, that was Erasmus's Greek New Testament, which is mainly taken from the Byzantine textual tradition, so it tends to be pretty similar to the patriarchal text, but it's not exactly identical. Then I'll sort of compare that more like standard English translation with things I with a slightly different translation that I think perhaps brings out certain aspects of the Greek in a better way. So I'll know if there's any questions or anything before we get started. It's just TLDR of what
No,
I'm
you
going to
just
be doing.
sounds good to me. You reminded me of some very common, maybe some will know on Ortho Twitter. Some people will say that the only proper text of the scriptures is the King James version. So maybe it's good we're using good we're using this version.
Well, I mean, the King James Bible, I mean, it's a good translation, at least of the New Testament. I can't speak of the Old Testament because they were translating from the Hebrew Masoretic text, and I don't read Hebrew. But at least the times I've been able to check the New Testament translation of what the King James has, it's not perfect, but I think it's pretty good overall. Though obviously people will argue back and forth about readability, and depends on whether
Mm,
you're on the thou side of English Orthodoxy or your side of English Orthodoxy. So.
it's true. I'm personally on the thou side, so I like the older English style, Shakespearean and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, no, I don't know. I see arguments for both, and I have some prayer books that are thee thou, some that are you your, and I just accept whatever comes to me. Is
Of
basically
course.
where I am at the current moment.
Right.
All right. So Jesus walking on water in Mark 6:50. So here I have the translation from the New King James Version. But immediately he talked with them and said to them, "Be of good cheer. It is I. Do not be afraid." So this is, of course, when the disciples are sailing on the Sea of Galilee and they see Jesus walking on the water and they think it's a ghost. And then this is Jesus's response to them. To them, of course, if you'd want to read just the Greek text from the patriarchal text I have there.
Sure. Putting my skills to the test as well.
Indeed,
Uh,
indeed.
Και ευθέως ελάλησε με ταυτόν και λέγει αυτής, «Θαρσείτε εγώ ημί, μη φοβήστε».
Yeah. So I've translated this here, and immediately he spoke with them and says to them, "Take heart, I am. Do not be afraid." I. So of course the major translation difference here is that the New King James has "It is I," and I put "I am." But that's because the phrase is "Ugly me," which I think is just most straightforwardly translated "I am." And I think is clearly a reference back to the book of Exodus when God speaks to Moses in the burning bush. I have here, and Moses asked God, "Well, what if the Israelites ask me, 'What is your name? What shall I say to them?'" And God responds to Moses, "Ugui mi o on." I am the one who is, or I am he who is. So, or from the Hebrew, sometimes translated as I am that I am. So I think the I am here is clearly meant to be a statement from Christ of some kind of divine identity. And I think if you translate it, it is I, which to be clear, it's not a wrong translation. Uh, but it does obscure things a little bit, I think. I I think is clear, and also, you know, there are passages in Job where God uh, is talking back to Job after Job has spent 38 chapters arguing with his friends and complaining about everything that's happened, all the horrible things that have happened to him. And one of the things God says is, "Have you walked on the depths of the sea?" Uh, so I think this is clearly also meant to be an allusion to, it's a prophecy of this passage of Christ. And I think a lot of these things are obscured if we translate "Egoi me" as "it is I" instead of "I am." And also I've translated here, you'll say it translates it in the past. He talked with them and said, it's legi in the Greek, which is says, it's present tense. It's fine to translate it as said because this is what grammarians call a historic present, right? So imagine I'm telling you a story and I'm like, well, yesterday I was at the grocery store and I walk up to the cashier and he says to me, "Hey, did you see the football game yesterday?" And you notice there, I said, I walked up to him and he said, right. So I switched to this historic present. The
Mm,
Gospels often do this. It's not wrong to translate it as a past, but just to reflect that it's grammatically a present tense, I've translated it here as says instead of said. Uh, so that's just one basic example of how things can be obscured if you don't know the Greek. So,
pretty cool. Pretty cool stuff. There's quite a few, I think, if I'm not incorrect, spots in the New Testament where Eloi me is important, and it's lost sometimes. I mean, there's one obvious one I think that's usually translated correctly, but there's some other spots too, right?
yeah, no, I mean, one, since we're in the resurrectional period, Jesus talking with Saint Photini, the Samaritan woman, the sort of ending exchange between Christ and the Samaritan woman, uh, is that, Saint Photini says, "I know that the Messiah is coming into the world." And it's often translated, Jesus says, "I, the one speaking to you, am he." But the Greek is "egoi mio olalonsi," literally, "I am the one speaking to you." It's like the first two words are "I am," right? The divine name. So
Mm,
that I think is another example of a similar passage where such things are lost on people. So,
yeah, pretty cool.
all right. So second example, parable of the prodigal son. So just I'm sure everyone has heard this context before. It's one of the three Sundays of the Triodion and Great Lent. So this is after the younger son is coming back to his father, and he says to his father, to them, because you can read the Greek there.
Bison me os enaton mistion su.
Yes, which just directly is make me as one of your hired servants. So this word mistion, that's a genitive plural, or misthos in the nominative singular, just means like a wage laborer, someone who like works for a wage. Here it's been translated hired servant. I and this I think is important to understand that that's the younger son's request to understand sort of the gravity of the older brother's response. So I have here the New King James Version. Uh, it says, but he was angry and would not go in. Therefore his father came out and pleaded with him. So he answered and said to his father, Lo, these many years I have been serving you. I never transgressed your commandment at any time, and yet you never gave me a young goat that I might make merry with my friends. But as soon as this son of yours came, who has devoured your livelihood with harlots, you killed the fatted calf for him. So that's the pretty standard English translation, New King James Version. To the Marcos, if you could read from the patriarchal text.
Orhisti dhe keuk ithelen iselthin, oun patir αυτού εξελθόν παρακάλει αυτόν, ο δε αποκριθής είπε το πατρί, ιδού το σάφτα έτι δουλεύω σοι και ουδέποτε εντολήν σου παρήλθον, και μη ουδέποτε έδωκας ερήφων, είναι μετά των φίλων μου εφρανθώ, ότε δε ο γιος σου ούτως ο καταφαγών σου των βίων μεταπορνών ήλθεν έθισας αυτό των μόσχων των σιτευτών.
All right, so this is the English translation I've made for this. But he was enraged and did not want to go in. So his father came out and started begging him. But he answered and said to his father, Look, all these years I'm slaving away for you, and I never once transgressed your commandment. And you never once gave me a young goat to celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has eaten up your life with whores, you killed the fatted calf for him. I I
Pretty
think
different.
that it sounds more intense, right? And I'm
100%.
and I'm trying to uh, draw out first and foremost, as I said before, that the younger son asked to be made a misthos, a hired servant, and then the first words out of the older brother's mouth are "Idul tosafta eti dulevosi." Look, all these years I'm slaving away for you. Uh, which it's a rather shocking response because the younger son, who's completely blown off his father and wasted his living and is now finally coming back in repentance. He asked to be made a wage laborer. And the older brother, who hasn't done anything wrong, at least externally, says, I've been a slave for you all these years in my own house. So I think that sort of shows us sort of the gravity of his response. Here also where it says uk then he did not want to go in. This, has would not go in, which again, it's not wrong, but I think it's a little bit more intense if you say he didn't want to go in.
Mm.
I I think it's also uh okatafagon suiton vion metapornon. I translate this and I have to admit I'm stealing a little bit from David Bentley Hart's New Testament translation here, who his translation is generally good, even though he's has some cringe theological takes and political takes sometimes, but such is life. Uh, I translate this here, who has eaten up your life with whores. Uh,
It's
and
much more
so like,
powerful, I think.
yeah, no, and I think it's meant to be a yeah, it's it's meant to be, and also he doesn't say my brother, which he would be, right? He says this son of yours, right?
Mm.
So he's like almost distancing himself from his own brother. And of course, the context of this parable, if you look earlier in the Gospel of Luke, is a number of scribes and Pharisees who are complaining to Jesus that he receives tax collectors and prostitutes. Prostitutes, of course, being pornos, right? And so I don't think it's a mistake that when Christ tells this parable as a series of parables in reaction to them saying this, the sort of climax is the older brother resentfully saying, this son of yours who's eaten up your life with whores, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so
It's funny, and maybe this was just my, lack of attention, but I didn't even realize till I read the Greek just now, just what it says, o kataphagon su ton vion metapornon. Like it didn't even really hit me. till I just read this part, and then when we looked at your translation, eating up your life with whores, and like in the KJV version, like I think harlots is not, and maybe it's just because it's an older word, but it just doesn't seem as harsh as saying like whores. The words are, I mean, it's the same thing. They're talking about the same things, but just one word is clearly, at least in my opinion, like it's sort of like shocking. Like, oh, like whoa, whereas the other one, it's just kind of sounds like more just like something you would read in literature. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and we're also talking about society. These are things we don't realize that where because of sort of the honor shame dynamics of ancient cultures, if a prostitute was walking down one side of the street and then there was just like a normal, like respectable person crossing on one side, the prostitute would literally go to the other side of the street to make room for the person because it was seen as shameful for them to even walk on like the same side of the road as a normal person, right?
Pretty wild.
So that's this is the culture there, and I think some of the older brothers' reflection of that culture and also his resentment, is reflected in what he says. Also, here the New King James says your livelihood. Again, not wrong, but the Greek is literally "souton vion," like your life.
Mm,
Right? So it's not just life in terms of like, hey, I make a living, I make money. I mean, that's obviously part of it, right? But it's also like
right.
he's devoured something from the father's own life by what he's done.
Yeah, pretty powerful, and a very Greek thing, I think, too. That phrasing, "kataphagon." I think it's a pretty Greek way to describe something, your life being eaten up. It's seems like something you find in other places in Greek literature and Greek, vocabulary and stuff.
Yeah, no, you also find it in the Gospel of John, right? When Christ is cleansing the temple, John makes this parenthetical. This is John chapter 2, where if the disciples remember that it is written, zeal for your house has eaten me up.
Mm,
And it's the same as katafago. It's the same verb there, right? To
yeah,
refer to Christ's zeal in cleansing the temple. Uh, shall we go on to the next passage?
yeah. Let's go to the next one.
Okay, so I'll read the New King James and then you can read the Greek. Uh, so this is, it's Christ is, the disciples are crossing the Sea of Galilee. Christ has gone to the stern of the boat. He's asleep with his head on the pillow, as the Gospel of Mark says. And then the storm is raging around them. The disciples wake him up and say, "Don't you care that we're all about to die?" Uh, and then that's where this verse comes in. Then he arose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. But he said to them, "Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith?" Then if you can read the Greek in the first bullet point.
Και διεγέρθης επιτίμησε το ανέμο και είπε τη θαλάσσι, σιώπα, πεφήμωσο, και εκόπασεν ο άνεμος, και γένετο γαλήνη μεγάλη. Και είπεν αυτής, τι δειλή εστέ ούτω, πώς ουκ έχετε πίστην?
So I've translated this. And having arisen, he rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Silence, shut up." And the wind stopped, and there was a great calm. And he said to them, "Why are you such cowards? How do you not have faith?" So, obviously, the main difference here is peace, be still, is very, very different than silence, shut up, which I think more accurately reflects what Christ is actually saying in the
Mm,
Greek text, right? And then also, why are you so fearful? Again, it's not wrong, but I mean, it's a noun here, right? Like,
mm,
it's like the word is describing the person. So, instead of saying you fearful, I've translated like why, dieste, why are you utos thusly or such cowards? Right?
mm,
Why are you such cowards? How do you not have faith? And it's pretty similar here. They just add in how is it that, but I just try to translate more directly, how do you not have faith? So
mm. Yeah, it's a very, I think we have sort of a modern sort of view of Christ that's very, I think often it's very emotionless and also very, maybe, I don't know exactly the right word, but just the idea, using this example, to even imagine Christ saying shut up is like kind of scandalous almost, I think, for modern ears. It's like, why would he wouldn't talk like that? Because he's like nice or something. It's like, why would you say like a phrase like that? It's sort of, but it's here, and that as you've translated and shown here, like that's what's in the text, but it's sort of it's strange to us to see something like that.
Yeah, no, I mean I think because and I don't think it's necessarily wrong that people have this view, but we have this view of, oh, this is the Bible, this is a sacred text, this is inspired by the Holy Spirit, right? And consequently, we think that we have to like translate it in this very respectful manner, but sometimes that like dulls the fact
Mm,
that there are very harsh things being said, right? Like, there's I'm blanking on the exact verse, but there's a part in St. Paul's epistles where he said, it's often translated, I count all things as refuse compared to
mm.
Christ.
I know,
Uh
yeah, I know you're
but
talking about.
but the word there, I mean, it's a four-letter word for dung, let's say.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh let the reader understand. So,
yeah.
and and again, we have to imagine that, especially in the ancient world, these letters from St. Paul would have been read publicly to the whole congregation after liturgy.
Mm,
And this is the word he chooses to use, right?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
so, there are oftentimes I think we mute things that are actually more harsh in the original text.
yeah, yeah. It also reminds me of one theologian. You also know who I'm talking about. I won't say who it is just out of respect for him. I don't know if he wants me to, just say this, but one of them, I remember years ago said um, that Christ often throughout the text is kind of sarcastic with certain things, and he's like kind of making jokes almost, and it's not, and we kind of miss that too if we don't kind of know the context of the historical context and stuff. It just seems like it's like, oh, he's just saying something. We just take it at face value, but there's more to it than that, and it's not just you know, the surface level, but it goes deeper, and it's a little, it's kind of funny, some of the things he's saying.
Yeah, no, there's a passage in the Gospel of Luke, right, where there's a man who yells out to Christ and says, Rabbi, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. And Jesus responds and says, Man, who made me an arbiter or a judge over you? Uh, and what Jesus is actually paraphrasing something from the book of Exodus, where, because Moses kills one of the Egyptian taskmasters who's oppressing the Hebrews. The next day, he sees two of the Hebrew slaves fighting, and he tells them not to fight. And the Hebrew slave says to Moses, Who made you an arbiter or a judge over me?
Mm, mm,
Uh, and so Christ is actually reversing the statement of the Hebrew slave, saying, Who made me an arbiter or a judge over you? uh, in his response to this guy who wants him to command his brother to divide the inheritance. So,
mm.
and
That's interesting.
there are many moments like that in scripture, but that's just one more example.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's cool. I didn't know about that one actually. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, we'll go here. So this is Jesus's genealogy and temptation. This is the Gospel according to Luke, chapters 3 and 4. So if you can just read the Greek text there.
Και αυτός ειν ο Ιησούς οσί ετών 300 αρχόμενος, ως νομίζετο Υιός Ιωσήφ, του Ηλί, του ενός, του Σιθ, του Αδάμ, του Θεού.
Yeah, so this is just the beginning of Jesus's ministry, and it's giving his genealogy. I've put dot 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 because it's just two and then a bunch of names, right? Uh, so yeah, I have here from the New King James Version. No, Jesus himself began his ministry at about 30 years of age, being, as was supposed, the son of Joseph, the son of Heli, dot dot dot, the son of Enosh, the son of Seth, the son of Adam, the son of God. I've translated it much the same, but with one major difference, I'd say. In Jesus beginning his ministry, the words ministry aren't in the Greek, so I've just put it in square brackets. In Jesus beginning his ministry was himself about 30 years old, being, as was thought, a son of Joseph, a son of Heli, a son of Enosh, a son of Seth, a son of Adam, a son of God. Uh, so I've just here because, it doesn't say, because if it was the son of Joseph, right? It'd have to be or Ios Yosef, right? But it doesn't say that, it just says a son of Joseph, right?
Mm,
And I think this is important for later when Christ is tempted. So we'll go on to the next thing. If you can just read this from the patriarchal text, this is the devil tempting Christ in the desert.
Κείπεν αυτό ο διάβολος, Υιός ή του Θεού, είπε το λίθο τούτο ή να γίνητε άρτος.
So in the New King James, and the devil said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command this stone to become bread." Or as I've translated it, and the devil said to him, "If you are a son of God, command this stone to become bread." So why have I put a instead of the? People will rightly ask, well, isn't Jesus the eternal Son of God, begotten of the Father before all ages, as the Creed says, of one essence of the Father? And of course he is. I affirm all those things, right? But what I'm trying to bring out in this translation is the fact that the devil does not know these things.
Mm,
Uh, it is actually something very, very clear, both in the scriptural and the patristic tradition of the church, uh, that no one was capable of understanding Christ's incarnation until after it had already happened, right? And so the devil doesn't know that Jesus is God by nature. What he knows, as we go back, right? Because it's Adam here who's called a son of God, right? So just as Adam was created sinless, was created with this special grace from God, he is a son of God in that sense, right? Christ, Satan recognizes Christ as the first sinless person he's seen since Adam. And
mm,
Satan thinks to himself, well, the way I tempted Adam was with food and it worked. So I'm going to tempt this guy with food and it'll work too. And so when he says, if you are a son of God, we should understand that as meaning something like, if you are sinless like Adam is, if you have this grace from God like Adam did,
mm.
then command the stone to become bread.
This reminds me, I don't know if this is, you can correct me if I'm taking this too far into something that's not really related, but it kind of reminded me of uh the Gospel of Nicodemus and also some of our like Paschal like chants and readings and stuff where when Hades and Satan are having a conversation and it's very clear that they don't recognize at the moment who Christ is basically until it's too late when Hades is like basically like, oh, something's wrong, like who is this, like who have you let inside of me, and then Satan's like, what do you mean, and then like Hades like blows up or something, they
Yeah,
clearly don't recognize him.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, and this is a very big part of our hymnographic and patristic tradition, right? The fact that in the garden, Satan deceived humanity, in a garden, meaning Gethsemane, right? Humanity deceived Satan,
Mm,
right? Humanity meaning Christ in human nature, right? Deceives Satan into thinking he's a mere human. And when, Christ's soul descends into hell, as you said, as is mentioned in the Gospel of Nicodemus, it explodes hell from the inside because they did not recognize who he truly was until it was too late.
mm.
Uh, so let's go on. This is just another part of the same passage of the temptation, something else I wanted to point out here. So if you can just read the Greek there.
Πήγαγεν αυτόν εις Ιεροσόλυμα και έστησεν αυτόν επί το πτερύγνιον του ιερού και είπεν αυτό, Υιός ή του Θεού βάλε σε αυτόν εντεύθεν κάτω και γραπτε γαρ ότι της αγγέλης αυτού εντελείται περί σου του διαφυλάξε σε και ότι επί χειρών αρούσιτσε μη ποτέ προσκόψεις προς λίθον τον πόδα σου και αποκριθείς είπεν αυτό ο Ιησούς ότι ρητέ ουκ εκπειράσεις Κύριον τον Θεόν. Of course I get a pop-up on my screen. Τον Θεόν σου. Αυτό.
Yeah, and just to go from here, so I just have put my translation here. And he led him into Jerusalem and stood him at the pinnacle of the temple and said to him, if you are a son of God, throw yourself down. For it is written, he shall give his angels charge concerning you to guard you, and they shall bear you up, lest you strike your foot against a stone. And Jesus answering said to him, it is said, you shall not tempt the Lord your God. So there's a few things going on here. One is that there's sort of a double meaning, right? Because Jesus responds saying, you shall not tempt the Lord your God. And the way the devil understands that is the devil understands that as uh, Jesus saying, I, as a human, should not tempt God by throwing myself down and expecting him to save me. But the actual intention of Jesus is saying is a warning to the devil because Jesus is divine by nature, right? He's the eternal Son of God. And Satan is trying to tempt him. And so Jesus is saying directly to Satan, you shall not tempt the Lord your God. So that's part of what's going on. Another thing, this psalm that Satan quotes, he shall give his angels charge over you concerning you to guard you. This in a Second Temple Jewish context was actually an exorcism psalm.
Mm,
So, and if you pray the sixth hour in the Orthodox Church, this psalm is still one of those that's prayed at the sixth hour because it's guarding against the noonday demon, right? So even in the context of the Orthodox Church, this psalm is still used as a psalm against temptation. So of course, it's highly ironic that Satan is taking a psalm that was used for exorcism and quoting it to try to tempt someone,
mm.
right? So that's one of the things that's going on here as well.
Pretty interesting there. I didn't know that. I didn't know that it was an exorcism psalm.
Yeah, yeah, no, if you just look at any prayer book at the sixth hour, you'll see that this exact psalm is
Mm,
one of the psalms that's prayed there.
it's pretty cool.
Uh yeah, no, if you just want to read uh ba, 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 ba. Oh, never mind. For some reason, I copied and pasted the same thing here, so just ignore that. Uh, but I have here just concerning what I was saying earlier about none of the angelic beings understanding the incarnation, right? I have from 1 Corinthians 2:8. This is just my translation. None of the rulers of this age understood, for if they understood, they would have never crucified the Lord of glory.
Mm,
Right. So just indicating that they didn't understand Jesus' true identity. And of course, here I have one of our Theotokions, mode 4. The mystery hidden from eternity and unknown to the angels has been revealed through you, O Theotokos. Right. So explicitly, that this, message was not known to the angels. And I believe I could have also put a passage in First Peter, right, where I think Peter also says that, to us has been revealed, quote, things into which angels long to look,
mm,
right? That the human being, even though created a little lower than the angels, as the psalm says, is destined for greater things than the angels are. And hence, there are some things human beings can understand that angels are not capable of understanding.
yeah. I've always found that really interesting. Just that idea that because it's sort of hard to comprehend almost because I think we think, or at least I don't want to speak for others, but myself, I think of angels as being something like above humanity. Like they're more powerful. They're probably maybe they're holier. They can do more things. Maybe that's dumbing it down too much. There's more to it than that. But just the idea that there's things that they just can't comprehend, but are comprehending, but they're like what they don't get it. Is just a very strange thought to think about.
Yeah, no, it's kind of similar to, and I think this is part of what Tolkien is doing in Lord of the Rings, if you've read or seen the movies, Sauron has great difficulty comprehending that the one who bears the ring is a
Mm,
hobbit, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
Sauron, this, basically great demonic intellect that's been around for millennia and millennia, and who can see and understand all sorts of things that normal mortals aren't capable of understanding, can't understand the humility
mm,
of a hobbit, right?
yeah,
And I think similarly, the angelic beings, and of course, particularly the demons who, for this reason, fell out of pride, they couldn't wrap their heads around the fact that these material beings that were, by all external appearances, lesser than the angels are the ones that God has destined to receive eternal life, right? And if you
mm,
read specifically St. Paul's letter to the Hebrews, a lot of it is about this, right? In the first chapter, he says, to what angel did God ever say, thou art my son, this day have I begotten thee?
mm,
Right? Like,
yeah,
this is what God says to Christ, right? What the
Hmm.
Father says to Christ, just become human. But he doesn't say it to the angels.
Mm.
The angels are simply ministering spirits. So,
Yeah.
shall we go on to the next passage?
Yeah, yeah. Let's go to the next one.
All right. So Jesus' arrest, John 18:3 through 8. So I'll read the New King James Version translation. Then Judas, having received a detachment of troops and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, came there with lanterns, torches, and weapons. Jesus, therefore, knowing all things that would come upon him, went forward and said to them, "Whom are you seeking?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus said to them, "I am he." And Judas, who betrayed him, also stood with them. Now, when he had said to them, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Then he asked them again, "Whom are you seeking?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I have told you that I am he. Therefore, if you seek me, let these go their way." And if you could just read the. Did I not put the Greek? If I didn't. Anyways, I just
Opa.
put the slides in long order. Never mind. If you can just read the Greek here.
All right. Un Judas lavontin spiran και εκ των αρχιερέων και Φαρισαίων υπηρέτας έρχεται εκεί μετά φανών και λαμπάδων και όπλων. Ιησούς ουν ειδός πάντα τα ερχόμενα επ' αυτόν, εξελθόν είπεν αυτοίς, τίνα ζητείτε, απεκρίθησαν αυτό, Ιησούν των Ναζωραίων. Λέγει αυτοίς ο Ιησούς, εγώ είμαι. Ίστηκε δε και Ιούδας ο παραδιδούς αυτόν μετ' αυτόν, ως ουν είπεν αυτοίς ότι εγώ είμαι. Απήλθον εις τα οπίσω και έπεσαν χαμέ. Πάλιν ουν αυτούς επιρώτησε, τι να ζητείτε, είδε είπον, Ιησούν των Ναζαραίων. Απεκρίθη Ιησούς, είπον ημίν ότι εγώ είμαι. Ή ουν εμέ ζητείτε, άφετε τούτος υπάγει.
All right. So I've also put my translation here. So Judas, having received the cohort of soldiers and officers from the chief priests and Pharisees, comes there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Then Jesus, having known all these things coming upon him, came out and said to them, "Whom do you seek?" They answered him, "Jesus of Nazareth." He says to them, "I am." And Judas, the one who handed him over, stood with them. Then, as he said to them, "I am," they drew back and fell to the ground. So again he said to them, "Whom do you seek?" They said to him, "Jesus of Nazareth." Jesus answered, "I told you that I am. So if you seek me, let these ones go." I so this falls into the category of the first one, as you were talking about places where Jesus is saying "I am." Then it's often obscured by the English translation. "I am he," which I don't know. It's like if they translate it, "It is I," that would be lame, but at least it would make sense, right? But like "I am he," like there isn't even a he here. It's just "egoi me." Like you would have to be like "egoi me aftos" or something like that for it to be
Mm,
"I am he." But that's not what the Greek says. Uh, and of course, the theological significance here is Jesus is saying "I am." He's saying the divine name, and then this group of soldiers, the ones who are betraying him, fall down to their knees as Jesus says the divine name, right? So the message that's being communicated here by St. John is that even Jesus's enemies, even those who are seeking to betray him and arrest him and kill him, unintentionally acknowledge his divinity,
mm,
right? Which is it's a point St. John makes elsewhere in his gospel, but I think it's a pretty interesting theological point.
yeah, for sure. I know it's funny. I didn't even know you were going to bring up this passage as well, and then I was thinking this when before when we talked about the other going me. I so we're really showing today how important this is. I think really understand the Greek because I think this really show this when you understand this with the passage, it's totally different.
Well,
You
yeah,
know.
of course, right? And there are many other passages in John, like it's often translated, when the Son of Man is lifted up, then you will know that I am he. But again, it's just when the Son of Man is lifted up, then you will know that I am.
Mm,
Like
yeah, and
like the
it's kind
way
of
that people will know Jesus is God by nature is his crucifixion, which is very interesting because often
mm,
people say, we know Jesus is God because of the resurrection. Well, that's part of it, but at least according to Jesus, it's his crucifixion that
Mm,
reveals his glory, right?
yeah, yeah. I was thinking too, this is kind of like one of those things with people are like, oh, where in the Bible, where in the New Testament does Jesus himself say that he's God? It's like, well, if you could read Greek, you wouldn't even ask that question.
Well, yeah, and also it's just sort of a category error, right? Because the way the Bible, or at least the New Testament, uses the term God, or theos, right? Literally the God,
Mm,
right? That term most often refers to the Father,
mm,
right? So you're not really going to find New Testament statements that say Jesus is Ortheos, because that would be saying Jesus is the Father, which is
mm,
not what the Bible and not what the church fathers or the church teach, right?
mm,
Like even John 1:1, right? In archein o logos, ke logos in pros ton theon, ke theos in o logos. So in the beginning was the logos, and the logos was with the God, and the logos was God, right? It
mm,
has the definite article to refer to the Father, but the no definite article to refer to the divinity of the logos,
mm,
right? So it's like the logos is the same kind of thing the Father is, eternal, uncreated, but he's not like literally the same person as the
mm,
Father, right? So even there, it's like because of that, you don't really find New Testament same as they're just like, oh, Jesus is God, right? It's more, Jesus is the uncreated logos of God ruling the world with God, right? That's like the New Testament way of thinking about it. And then even, the formulations of the Cappadocian fathers, right? That, the Trinity is, three hypostases in one ousia and one feces, three persons in one nature, essence. These are ways of describing the New Testament language, right? But even
mm,
then, you still have people like St. Basil the Great who say there is one God because there is one Father,
mm,
right? And Jesus is of the same essence as God. He's eternally begotten from God, right? But he's a different person, right? So because of that, we can say Jesus is God. That's not wrong. But what we mean by that is Jesus has the same nature as the Father, not that he's like literally the same person, right?
mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So true.
I And I also have one quote here. So this is from Quodvult Deus. So he was a bishop, I believe, who was friends with St. Augustine of Hippo. He himself is not a saint in the Orthodox Church, but this quote about this passage is really cool. And so hence I included it. Uh, they come with their torches, lanterns, and weapons. The many seek the one, and the sons of darkness come, bearing in their hands light, through which they would reveal the true light to others, the true light that they themselves, blinded, were not able to hold in their heart. And behold, the true light, who lies hidden there under the cloud of flesh, looks at the darkness, and it fell to the ground. In order that the light might accomplish what it came for, however, the darkness gets back up. He gives the darkness power over himself. Darkness seizes the light, not to follow, but to kill it. The light permits himself to be seized by darkness, to be led away, to be hung, to be killed, in order that, stripped of the cloud of flesh, he might restore the splendor of his majesty.
Pretty powerful quote.
Yeah, no, this whole the light looks at the darkness and the darkness falls to the ground, right? And that even the
Yeah,
sons of darkness are holding lanterns and torches, which of course are means of light, you know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true. You know,
Yeah.
this name, Quodvult Deus, doesn't that sound like what would be totally a name for like a username on Twitter or something? But it's not. But I mean, that's like his actual name. But like when I first read it, I because it's like obviously the old meme from like 2018 or whatever, like Deus Volt. Right?
Yeah.
It's not only a meme, obviously it's from the Crusades and stuff, but it just reads like Quodvult Deus. Like some guy's like, what should I should come up with a cool Christian name for my Twitter account. Aha, Quodvult Deus. That's how it reads. Like, but that's actually that's awesome.
Yeah, it sounds like a name that a LARPer on Twitter
Yeah,
would
yeah,
put as
yeah.
his username, but this is the name of an actual person. Also, it was like the fourth century, so he's not a LARPer by definition.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
That's true.
So, just in case people want to learn more, if they're interested in learning ancient Greek, and I want to emphasize, I'm not saying that you can't understand the Bible if you don't know Greek. I'm just saying there's certain things you're going to miss, right? And even if you don't know Greek, you're probably going to be want to be reading a commentary from someone who does, right? Who can point out these kinds of things to you. But if you're interested in learning Greek for yourself, which I do recommend if you have the desire and time to do so, here are a couple books. So this is a primer of biblical Greek by N. Clayton Croy. This is at least the biblical Greek textbook that is used at Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology for the required biblical Greek courses for the Master of Divinity degree. And then there's also this book, Athenasde, an introduction to ancient Greek by Maurice Baum and a few other co-authors. Uh, that is a introduction to Attic Greek grammar, which is quite good. And if you learn Attic Greek and find it difficult, then Biblical Greek is easier. So if you intend on reading more than just the Bible, let's say you want to read Homer or Plato or the Church Fathers, it's better to learn Attic Greek first and then sort of go on to Biblical Greek, which is easier. So
There's a good for people also, just speaking of what you can read, with from the Byzantine period, a lot of people expect, oh, I should study Byzantine Greek so I can read the text. But that's not really true. I mean, there are things you can read, but a
yeah,
lot of literature from the Byzantine period or the Eastern Roman period is written in Attic, right?
correct.
Not medieval Greek. So you need to study the ancient stuff anyway if you want to read a lot of the Orthodox stuff and medieval stuff and all those things.
Yeah, no, if you want to be able to read like a large different amounts of ancient Greek text, the way to go is to learn Attic. And then from there, you can sort of learn any sort of like dialect or variant you want because basically, like think about it that like Attic is like like the like most central form of Greek, and everything else is just a form or
Mm,
variation of Attic. Like that's not strictly speaking true, but I think that's like a good way for people to think about it as they're approaching learning it. So,
yeah. I actually have that book. I have it right here. Not Athenais, the other one.
oh yeah, the Primer of
Common
Biblical Greek
Biblical
by
Greek.
Croy.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
used this one. I think it's good textbook. You know,
It's a good textbook though in the practice sentences he gives. It's a good book, but you can sense the Protestant theological
mm.
bias in some of the practice sentences. But maybe I only see these things because I myself am an ex-Protestant. So,
Yeah. Well, I
you
mean,
know,
sincerely, no offense to you as you're a Southerner, but with a name like Clayton Croy, it's hard to not, know, oh, this must be a guy with some Southern Protestant background, probably, or this fellow here.
look, the Southern Protestants who become Orthodox, they're a force to be reckoned with. So.
That's true. Um, all right. Well, do you have any other thoughts about kind of the things we've talked about today? Um, or anywhere else you wanted to go with the conversation?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I would just say, if you're interested in learning ancient Greek, pick up one of these two books. There's also tons and tons of online resources and YouTube videos for people who are interested in learning ancient Greek. So, it's easier now than ever to learn it. Though, of course, it obviously helps if you can take like a formal class or have like a structure or people who can help keep you accountable to learning it because, well, learning any language is difficult and you'll be tempted to give up. This is always the case.
It's true.
So and also just as you're reading the scriptures, it's not just a matter of academic study, but also, of prayer and of paying close attention because some of these things, it's not only a matter of knowing the Greek or the English text or whatever. It's also a matter of, praying that God enlighten you, of reading commentaries by the church fathers, and also just paying close attention to the text. I mean, even the thing about the connection between, the son of Seth, the son of Adam, the son of God in Luke's genealogy, and then connecting that with Satan calling Jesus a son of God right after. I had read the Gospel of Luke many, many times and never made that connection. It was just one time it sort of suddenly came to me, and then all these dots connected in my head
Mm,
with various things of the church's tradition. So I'd just say pay attention to the details and, pray about it, and slowly your understanding will increase. And of course, if you're so inclined, learn Greek. So,
yeah. What would you say to people? Obviously, a lot of our audience is, Greek Americans, but then also other people too. We have, people from other Orthodox countries and even some, converts and different people, right? So to these different, people with these different kinds of backgrounds, what would you say, why should they, other than just the obvious? I mean, why can't they just be like, oh, I'll just listen to whatever my priest says. He's going to tell me what it means, and then that's it. That's where it ends. Why go deeper and really like understand it? Like why is that a good thing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with listening to what your priest says, right? I mean, the priest is the one put over your parish by your bishop, and your bishop has been installed there by the synod, who's been installed there by God, right? Right. So even, so I do think people should listen to the authorities that are put over them, right? But the reality is, and I don't say this to uh knock any particular person, right? But I mean, you know, uh, generally in America, priests go get an undergrad degree, then they go get a master of divinity, and they've had, maybe 2 semesters of biblical Greek in there, and that's good background knowledge to have, but it doesn't necessarily mean they've gone through and, read entire books of the New Testament in Greek, right? Or tried to analyze these things carefully. So some of these things, and I don't say this to speak ill of anyone, they may not be aware of those things. And so if these are things you're interested in studying or trying to become aware of, it is something you'd have uh, to put more effort into finding those things. I was lucky that in seminary, I got to take several classes with Father George Parsenios that were basically just translating straight through books of the New Testament in Greek. And it helped me realize many of these things that previously I just hadn't recognized in the text. Him pointing those out and also just translating them myself helped with that a great deal. So,
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, I think we've covered some pretty good ground here. I've definitely learned some things. Um, I love to look at the Greek text and see, the deeper meanings and the extra quote unquote things behind everything. So uh I like it a lot. Yeah, Jacob, any final thoughts as we end here?
uh, God loves you. Christ is risen. Go to church. Those are my thoughts.
Truly he's risen. So true. All so true. All right, well, I guess that's it. We'll end it here. Thank you, Jacob, for coming on here with me. Great talking with you as usual. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe.
Yeah, thanks
And
everyone,
yeah, of
and thanks so much for having me.
course, farewell.